Welcome to A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. The Bible tells one big story of redemption, and we want to spend 5 minutes every day journeying through the Bible from start to finish and exploring how all of it points to Jesus.
Hey guys, welcome back to the A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace podcast. I'm Kristen, and today we're going to continue to work through the book of 1 Chronicles together with chapters 19 through 21. So in today's chapters, we pick up with an ancient political update. The Ammonite king had died. Now, this king had been kind to David, and so when he died, David sent some of his servants to console the Ammonite people. But the princes of the Ammonites thought that these slaves were actually spies. They thought they were spies sent to scope out the land, and so they sent them back humiliated. They shaved their beards, they cut off their clothes, which would have been really violating at the time. And when David heard this, he protected his men. He told them to stay in the city until their beards grew back, and then they could return to their homes. And at some point after this, the Ammonites realized what they've done, and they essentially decided to provoke Israel with an act of aggression. And so they rose up to battle against Israel. And David heard this, and so he sent out Joab and his mighty men who fought not only the Ammonites, but also the Syrians, and they defeated them. Military battles will continue into chapter 20, including the defeat of a giant with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. And then finally, in chapter 21, we see this interesting story. It's actually a pretty interesting and sad story when David was enticed by Satan to number the people of Israel. We see that Joab tried to stop him, but David did it anyways, and God was not happy. And so the Lord gave David 3 options for his punishment, and David picked a plague, and over 70,000 men died. And as David was looking up in the sky, he saw an angel of the Lord between heaven and earth with a sword stretched out to Jerusalem, and he lost it. He repented of his sins. He prayed that he alone would bear the weight of judgment. After all, David realized he's the one who sinned. He should bear the punishment. And then David offered a sacrifice to God, and the plague stopped. Okay, so you may be wondering at this point, what's the big deal about a census? So many books of the Bible number the people of God. We know that God's not against counting or keeping track of the size of a nation. Well, some scholars say that David's motivation here was wrong, that he was proud and wanting to feel strong. And so he based his strength not in the Lord, but in how many people he ruled over. Other scholars point back to Exodus 30, chapter 30, verse 12, which talked about taking a census and urged not only that the Lord should have the initiative of taking a census, but also the need for a ransom payment when the census was taken. But either way, whether one of these reasons or something else, we know that David disobeyed God, and there were terrible consequences for his sin. And from these chapters, we see that David, he was a good king, but he was not a perfect one. He had moments of selfishness, just like we all do, and his people suffered for it. And there's only one king who never sinned, who was never self-seeking or proud or rude. That's King Jesus. He is the only good king, and by his righteousness, our life is secured. Just like by David's disobedience, so many were sent to die. Now by the death of Christ, we are allowed to live. So are we trusting more in our own strength or in the Lord's? In application of these chapters, do we protect the weak around us, just like David did with his humiliated men? Do we use our positions and our authorities to promote justice? Or do we seek selfish gain and try to use our influence primarily to make ourselves look good? Not that there's anything bad about getting a promotion at work or knowing how much money you have in the bank account, but the question for application becomes, who or what are you trusting in? Are you trusting that the Lord provides what you need? Or are you trusting in your bank account? And if anything, by reading today's verses, we should be reminded that God is enough. He provides for us, and we should trust in him. And that wraps up today's podcast. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on Instagram at Daily Grace Podcast or the Daily Grace Co. And if you'd like to follow along with our Bible study that goes further in depth into each study day, you can check out the Story of Redemption Bible Study on the Daily Grace Co. website. Also, if you have a couple minutes, we would love it if you could leave a review on iTunes with how you're liking this podcast. It helps other people find us who want to read God's Word on their own in a year. And as always, thanks for listening, and we'll talk with you more tomorrow.